All right. So, are you able to see me, us on FB Live? Satyajit, can you please check?
Yes, Gitanjali. Hello.
All right, great. What happened? The sound is not coming. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
The sound is the music coming?
We are able to hear you, but not the music.
Not the music.
What's going on?
Now it is coming.
Okay, great.
Very
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you. Very good.
Suresh, over to you.
Good morning, good evening, good day. Welcome to our webinar on envisioning rural and urban communities post-COVID-19. I'm Suresh Shenoy, President of Wheels Global Foundation. Wheels was started in 2006 and incorporated in 2013 by the alumni of the Indian Institutes of Technology. It stands for the 6 areas that pose the greatest challenge to humanity: water, health, energy, education, rural livelihoods, and sustainability. Our mission is to offer technology-enabled solutions to the many NGOs to help scale their work. Where solutions do not exist, we encourage research and development at the IITs and other similar institutions through sponsorship. We are a volunteer organization and depend on the generosity of our many donors and patrons who believe that scale can only be achieved by leveraging technology. Hence our tagline, technology-enabled philanthropy. Having implemented many projects for clean water, healthcare, sanitation, education, etc., with partners such as Spoken Tutorials, Sevak, and Habitat for Humanity in India, we have embarked on an integrated approach for smart village development. Our first such initiative is in Aravalli district in Gujarat, where we are working on a list of projects that were jointly prioritized by students from IIT, the local panchayats, and is being implemented by partners like IEEE and Mission Samriddhi, who are with us today. You can get additional information at our website, wheelsglobal.org and wheelscharitables.org, where there is also a donate button if you wish to contribute to our efforts. Now, a quick disclaimer: all views expressed by the speakers in this webinar are their own and do not reflect nor endorsed by Wheels Global Foundation or Wheels Charitable Foundation or its board and its members. A few housekeeping messages. All attendees are on mute through the webinar. If you wish to ask a question to the speakers, you may do so by entering the question in the Q&A box. If you need any help or instructions, you can chat with one of us by raising your hand or typing your request in the chat box. If your questions remain unanswered for whatever reason, we will send you an email at the end of the event, or you may also send us your question by mail to info@wheelsglobal.org. A recording of this event will also be available at our website. We apologize to those who are unable to join because of capacity. This event is also being live cast on Facebook. And now it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the moderator, Yogesh Andlay. Yogesh is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and a serial entrepreneur. He is a co-founder of 2 well-known companies, Polaris and Nucleus. He's also on the board of a dozen other companies and a philanthropist. And above all, we are proud that he's also on the board of Wheels. Over to you, Yogesh.
Yogesh, you are on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh. Thank you for your observations and introduction. Our topic today is envisioning rural and urban communities post-COVID-19. You must be wondering, what does urban stand for? Urban communities are rural communities with a degree of urban amenities available there, urban features available there. In India, we see them largely in the state of Kerala, Goa, and several hill states. In our last webinar, we had visualized post-COVID-19 world from the axis of social, political, economic, and ecological dimensions, and the impact of Industry 5.0 on these dimensions. The moment we encountered this pandemic, the moment this pandemic emerged, there was a large-scale confusion. The infections, the COVID virus, the COVID infection started all over the world almost simultaneously with hardly any lag or any reaction time given to anybody. And in India, at some point of time, early in the cycle, India decided to lock down the entire country. It helped in containing the infection, the rate at which the infection would have grown, but it caused a large-scale sort of disruption and confusion all over the country, and slowly different communities started learning how to respond to this crisis, this lockdown. So today we are going to discuss and envision what the post-COVID world would look like from the perspective of these rural communities. What do we envision these rural communities, the urban communities in post-COVID-19 world? Today, we have a very distinguished panel. There are three of them. Dr. Vibha Gupta from Magan Sangrahalay, Wardha. Dr. Vibha heads Magan Sangrahalay, and this is an institution. It's a unique institution, and it has a large museum, a museum of rural technologies, be it agriculture, textile, food processing, the carpentry, the leather works, you name it. And it was started by Mahatma Gandhi. That's a very, very unique distinction. Vibha chairs Magan Sangrahalay Samiti, besides a number of Gandhian institutions in Wardha. The next speaker we have is Mr. Ram Pappu. He's from Mission Samriddhi, Chennai, and I'll come to sharing more about Mission Samriddhi with you later. And the third speaker we have is Mr. Farid Khan. He's chairman of IEEE South Asia Smart Village program. We will spend about 15 minutes with each panelist. It will be an interactive discussion with them. And then we will open it for question and answers from the floor. So starting with Vibha first. Dr. Vibha, you're seeing this crisis very closely from very, very close quarters. You're there in Wardha, and you're seeing rural communities experiencing the hardship or the anxiety of COVID. So could you please tell us a bit about what you do in Magan Sangrahalay, and how has this COVID crisis impacted you and the community around you? Over to Vibha.
Thank you, Yogesh. It's a deep crisis. It's a very saddening crisis, and I really feel sorry for the world, for all the people who lost their loved ones because of COVID-19. And it's great that in India we had only 2,500 people who died because of COVID in a country with 130 crore people. This is commendable as far as the government, people, administration, and media is concerned. And the same flowed down to our people who did everything indigenously possible for them to get out of this risky, unseen virus. And this is not the first virus, because in the last 5 years, we had at least 4 different kinds of viruses coming from China, and we had to deal with them. So the whole process of dealing with this crisis into other crises, there are 673 viruses that are floating the air, they come and go. And Indian people are quite immune because they have their own indigenous system of looking after themselves, going to yoga, herbal medicines, and all different things that they do for themselves. And it's interesting that Wardha remained a green zone, and many of the places remained green zone because people felt that they are responsible for themselves. So I had a feeling, I was surprised that, of course, the media really overplayed it, but people underplayed it, and within their own resources, within their own community, strict following of the rules of physical distancing and other things. But one thing that they all felt that it wasn't a war, it wasn't our warriors. It is a natural phenomena that happens because you're tampering with nature. You're tampering with the land, with oceans, with the environment, and also the space. Your 4G, 5G fights and everything. So I have a feeling that all the people felt that this was a city brought calamity, war from foreign land, and the people had to suffer. But the suffering is really deep because the scars are deep. The whole economy is disturbed. People starve and die, not because of the disease, but the other impacts that it has. So I think the scientific community has to rethink about it, because this whole investment that goes in, the psychological, emotional, financial that goes into it, with 100 laboratories working the same thing, and the people left with absolutely no solace. So I have a feeling that people in India are very versatile, very flexible, very adaptive. But this was the first time that they felt cheated. So if you want me to tell about the villages?
Further, what made them feel like this?
They feel cheated because in India, they don't mind death, because 1 crore people die every year because of some disease or other. But it is the fright that the respect and the festivity they give to death, and all the rituals they follow for the next birth to be much better than this birth. They felt cheated that this was a disease in which they are going to die unsung death. They are going to have no rituals added to it. So that frightened them the most. Even many people who migrate was basically they didn't want to die alone. So this is basically a very ceremonious country which has a very different definition to death and pain. Were felt cheated because nobody could tell them what is it, what should they do to get out of it. So that was one thing which really everybody felt that made them go from red to green, because they followed something that they didn't want to have unceremonious death. People also felt that they're coming back to villages. Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. So I would like to bring back the discussion to our how the communities are getting impacted. So you brought about a very, very important social dimension of it. Could you please share with us? We hear a lot of economic hardships being faced all over the country, all over the world because of lockdown. There's movement embargo, there's a embargo, there's a stoppage of supplies. So what kind of economic impact do you see in the community around you? And what kind of innovative methods are you using to stay afloat?
Yogesh, the point was that India was already in economic crisis after demonetization, and this crisis was strengthened or deepened by this kind of Covid-19 crisis because of the lockdowns. All the people who are producing perishables like vegetables, fruits, eggs, fishes, and milk had to throw it away or sell it at very, very low price, or let it stay in the farm because they had no other way. The farmers couldn't sell their produce because the mandis were not working, and they are still sitting with a lot of inflammable cotton in their house. They're staying outside, and there's something went wrong with the weather, whether it's global warming or something, that every day we are having storms and rains. So all the produce that's sitting outside in open, there's a big risk to the farmers because they are not able to sell it. So I think that there's no preparation downline. It was like opening the gates when it floods. So I have a feeling that we have to have some kind of infrastructure to help these kinds of crises to happen. And then you have this huge migration of people from other places to small towns and the villages. Villages have no work, have no place. Agriculture is actually a dying enterprise. And the amount of money that these migrants are getting in total sum is something like 7 rupees 50 paisa per day per labor. That's not enough. We have to plug in and really increase this amount. The traditional industries are no more there. The artisans don't have any work because of the competition of whatever you say, international world trade and competition with countries like China, that our artisans really don't have much space here. So, and in this situation, the crisis is manifold of the labor who have come back because there's no work for them. The government's initiative to plug in Manrega and other work will take little time because still the gates are not open. The boundaries are locked. So in this situation, the Indian economy, especially the village economy, which is very fragile, people don't have any savings. People just live on what they earn every day. So this is going to lead to a huge number of malnutrition, starvation, and diseases.
Thank you, Vibha. So we are talking to technologists. So Wheels is an organization formed by technologists. So what message would you like to give us, that what kind of technologies should we be working on, which could be useful to you and these rural communities?
Actually, what frightens me with this whole team of technology savvy people is this: now the World Bank has given the $1 billion assistance to India for the social security technology, so that the 400 odd programs that the government of India has could reach the right people, go to the targeted people, the remote houses, remote areas where the people are. So these very security programs reach them. The corruption is reduced. There's a direct link. The cybercrime will be reduced, and all that. And then you talk about, intelligence. What do you call it? Artificial intelligence or machine training and everything. That's fine. I understand that this big data that one is talking about will have an impact on this whole scenario of Indian mindset. But what is needed is there's an extreme lacuna of infrastructure in the villages. Number one, that 90 days of rain that we get, we need to have technologies to conserve this rain and utilize water, because water scarcity is going to be a very major crisis in time to come. Number two is that we don't have power energy in the way that we really need, the sufficient power. There's fluctuations, the grid is bad, based on coal and hydro, it's not going to work because we are going to deplete all these resources. We have to shift to alternative technology, cleaner technology in a big way, and provide regular and sufficient appropriate energy to the villages. Number three is that infrastructurally, we don't have warehouses, storage places, or cold storage systems, proper transportations. So the roads are there, the transportation is not there. So, and this is not possible if you depend on the fossils, if you depend on the present system of control of petrol and other things. We have to have alternative means of cleaner energy, zero waste, and looped in production. And all these have to come in. And this really demands a huge lot of technical people to come in. India has 15 geoclimatic zones where people do agriculture and processing. They don't have proper tools. They don't have technologies. The artisans don't have any tools. They don't even have good shoes to wear. They don't have safety guards. So one has to really start from zero, really analyze every aspect in which we need science, technology, training, know-how, and dissemination processes. People have smartphones, but 50% don't have smartphones. Half of them, most of them are basically defaulters at the bank, so the bank linkages go wrong. So all these things we have to take in together with a very understanding that India has a very fragile nature, natural resources. our diversity dies very fast because 72% of our diversities just go because of a bad seed, all that. Farming is one structure which you know that so many farmers has committed suicide because the farming is in a very bad shape and badly managed. So there's no dearth of technologies that friends like you can really join hand and bring to people. And we can really make a big, big difference because people are ready. They're much more conscious. They're much more linked, and they really want to do something collectively.
Thank you. Thank you for giving this message that we are ready now to embrace technology. And there's a strong need of water conservation, clean energy, new methods of agriculture, the agriculture produce being transported and stored or locally processed so that in times of crisis like this, the farmers don't suffer the crash of price. They can hold on to their produce. So now I turn towards.
And Yogesh, one more small thing that I want to add is
please.
the lacuna in the service sector. The whole service sector in the rural areas is totally zero. You don't have proper masons, carpenters, electricians, mechanics. So though we are borrowing things from the cities, but there's no ownership. There's nobody, if you have a gobar gas plant, you don't have a gobar gas plant wala, cycle wala, motorcycle repair wala. So all these walas have to be trained. And you have a good connect now with all these media and other things and e-training and other things. Even about health is a huge issue in the village. So I think these all technologies I've missed in my previous statements.
Thank you. Thank you. We will be touching upon this and we'll probably come back to you later after Ram and Mr. Farid Khan. So now I turn towards Mr. Ram Pappu. Mr. Ram Pappu represents Mission Samriddhi. Mission Samriddhi is using design thinking approach to look at the social problems and design scalable interventions. They focus a lot on engagement of communities in the design, the drafting of their own development plans, and development of leadership capabilities amongst the panchayat leaders. Their approach towards cluster development program is now mainstream and included in the Rashtriya Gram Swarajya Abhiyan, also known as RGSA. So, Ram, could you briefly share with us something about Mission Samriddhi? You have a lot of fellows on the ground working with these communities and the local leaders. So what do you hear from these fellows? What are they saying about the local communities in this COVID scenario?
Thank you, Yogesh, very much for your introduction. And I really wish to thank Wheels Global Foundation for this opportunity. Greetings to all the participants from all over the world. So many of you are tuned in into this meeting. Just shows your interest to support our rural communities in these unprecedented times. Very briefly, I'll be very brief and I'll just try to mention a few things about Mission Samriddhi as an organization. We have actually grown from the grassroots, bottom up, listening, observing, dialoguing, and working with grassroots practitioners in rural India over the past few years has helped us understand this one major challenge, right? And this is the problem we're really trying to solve, that our Gram Panchayats need to be institutionally strengthened to govern themselves. And we have kind of worked bottom up to help evolve, I must say, a holistic development framework, which is focused on, the personal development, like what's in it for you, what motivates the individual and the community around, personal development, social development, economic development, and as Vibha was actually talking a few minutes back, ecological developments, so important that we are protecting our environment. In this journey, we've aligned organizations who've got some very good models, whether it's in empowerment, whether it's in skilling and livelihood, education, and the water, sanitation, health area. We have actually a platform of more than 100 plus, we call them development accelerators. And we always make a comment on this lightheartedly that why do you want to call it NGO? Just because your non-government organization or a government organization, we're all on the same side. So we call everybody as development accelerators working for the same cause. And today we work in 200 plus panchayats in 8 states. And as you said, through a cluster development approach. Now, this is about Mission Samriddhi and the work we were doing until COVID-19 struck. Fundamentally, we're challenging limiting beliefs and we're helping transform the mindsets. I think we believe that if the mindsets are not transformed, no amount of development can really seep in. So this is a foundational initiative which we call Preparing the Soil. When people see model villages, people get inspired, they observe the prosperity and they're inspired, and therefore self-belief is the first step to self-empowerment. We're working with local governments in the governance process as a catalyst through our fellows. We work in Maharashtra with establishing thousands of backyard kitchen gardens, fighting anemia. And as Vibha was saying, we were, the problem of small and marginal farmers with 1 acre and 2 acre, agrarian crisis is not just hit us now, it's been there for a long time. Now, how do we enhance the income of these small farmers? So we work with partners where, we have proven models which are enhancing the income of these small farmers through direct farm to folk sales models. So this is the kind of work we have been doing. But now what we hear from the ground, the challenges that, I've been talking to our fellows who work in Chhattisgarh, in Assam and in Maharashtra. And we also work in clusters in Uttar Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, as well as also in Jharkhand. Now, the first challenge is restricted mobility, which is causing hardship with limited access to markets for small farmers. Vibha already spoke about it. Farmers need credit now, and they need farm inputs for the forthcoming season, and they need money now. So that's hard. There's a big hardship right now. All this on-site capacity building that used to happen of the community, whether it's the farmers, the panchayat representatives, the gram sabhas, all this has completely come to a standstill, right? People are used to working, building capacity on-site. So that's come to a standstill. This is the restricted mobility is a first challenge. Vibha spoke about it. The second big challenge I'm hearing from a field is returning labor. And returning labor means, first and foremost, basic provisions and care during the quarantine period. It's a challenge, and it's being handled, but it's a big challenge. Getting them appropriate work and wages. And also, I think there is a social element. Overall, how do we maintain overall social harmony and make sure that there is no social unrest that happens? A third challenge is that we're hearing that there's a lot of extra pressure on the health and sanitation infrastructure. So, and people are a little worried that this may take away the focus from women and child development, or even from from agriculture itself. So it's going to be a tremendous amount of the challenge on health sanitation. And the last thing is that, and you've been hearing this in the news, all the government schemes and the packages. We've been hearing about them yesterday with MSME, and today, this evening, the finance minister announced a slew of measures for the farmers, for the agriculture strengthening. But getting these packages and these schemes reach the last person at the last mile has always been a challenge, and in these times it continues to be a major challenge. So I think this is what we are hearing from the voices from the grassroots, Yogesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram, to bring these challenges, the issues from the ground state, because you are directly connected with these fellows on the ground. Just to share with you, with our viewers, the background of this is that in India, the rural government, which is called the panchayat, has been accorded a constitutional status. Through amendment of constitution, it's recognized as self-government, and a degree of funds are provided directly to the panchayats to be used for development work in consultation with the community there. The local community can sit down and decide on what do they want to do. And these programs or these development plans, which are called Gram Panchayat development plans, are being given a tremendous push by the government, and different villages, village panchayats, they sit down and make these Gram Panchayat development plans. And Mission Samriddhi and many other organizations like Mission Samriddhi actually go and work with the Gram Panchayats to help them develop their plans and upload it to government websites. Well, Ram, we also hear that a lot of Gram Panchayats, and especially in Kerala, they have been doing phenomenally good amount of work, and they have done tremendously well in managing this crisis. So could you please share a bit about what happens there? How do they work and how do they manage the crisis like this?
So I'm glad, Yogesh, you brought up the question of Kerala, because when we talk about, which are those communities and states which are really flattening the curve, people talk about Taiwan, but then really let's look at our own state of Kerala, right? The way they have flattened the curve, and people are absolutely trying to understand what Kerala is doing right. But I just want to say this, that the story of Kerala is, Kerala has had a head start. Kerala has had a head start by 25 years. It's not overnight that we are seeing this success of Kerala in the way they've been able to manage the crisis. What really happened, Yogesh, is, when we had the 73rd Amendment, Constitutional Amendment, where you talked about the Gram Panchayats getting enabled, guess what? Kerala was the first state to, accept the Panchayat, the 73rd Amendment, and in true letter and spirit, they actually devoluted the complete powers to the panchayats, which means 1/3 of the state development budget was actually given away to the panchayats. So they did it was like it was not through a lot of analysis. It was a momentous decision which the state just took. So 1/3 of the state budget. So in true letter and spirit, funds, functions, and functionaries were completely given away to the panchayats. Now, prior to that, there was a People's Plan campaign where people actually got empowered on what this whole new constitutional amendment was, what were the roles and responsibilities as a local citizen, what role do they have in the local governance process. So that actually a community took ownership. And when the money started coming into the panchayats, and we all know that Kerala already were benefited because of the literacy levels being so high, the fact that they wanted to question and debate, all this added to the fact that three things happened, Yogesh. Three things. One is the local governance became absolutely empowered. The communities were empowered. And we had another huge factor, which is the thriving self-help groups. Around the same time, there was an organization called Kudumba Shri, which is actually about, if you look at 45 lakh women, which is 4.5 million women who are part of a self-help group. It's probably the world's largest NGO. Now, these women were empowered. They're running businesses. They were running, they were creating products, and they were thriving economically. So you had empowered communities, you had empowered government, local government. You had these very strong self-help groups, and added to that, the village health infrastructure was, you have to see Kerala to see the kind of world-class health infrastructure they have. So they have this concept of family health centers. So with all these things that have really happened, so it's not a miracle. It's not like it's a no-brainer that this is a consequence of stuff that has happened over the last 25 years. And it's quite interesting. I was watching this video about data-driven governance. I mean, you must see their website where they actually present data so intuitively about the way the crisis is being handled, the way they're sharing information with the citizens, the way they make PowerPoints in multiple languages. Why multiple languages? Because they have the maximum number of migrant labor coming in from all parts of northern India and other places into Kerala. Guess why? Because they pay 650 rupees a day when other wages in other states are very low. So the whole data, the way it's being presented, it's so beautifully designed and thought through. I can only say this about Kerala, that socially, economically, ecologically developed. When we talk about the, in corporate circles, we talk about the triple bottom line, right? People, profit, and planet. I think Kerala is a classic example of people, profit, and planet all aligning together. So that's the Kerala story. I've been there, and probably I'm talking too much about Kerala, but this is Kerala.
So, taking this experience from Kerala and these rural or urban communities that we see in Kerala, how do you see these lessons or these learnings could be transferred to similar communities all over the country? Because the panchayat system is almost similar. So, what's your observation on that?
See, Kerala is Kerala. It's very difficult to completely, rip and replace and just replicate Kerala in other states. We can't do that overnight, but we can learn some best practices which we can take into the other states, right? It's a big topic about panchayat systems. The acts are more or less same in all the states, but you need to have the political will where funds, functions, and functionaries are completely devoluted to the people, right? The devolution of power happens. But I must say that envisioning post-COVID, and that's the topic we're talking about, envisioning our rural communities and what we can pick up. Vibha spoke about this earlier, and we've seen this in other communities in India. We see that small farmers selling fruits, vegetables direct to customers through farm to fork models. This is going to really thrive. This is going to come up in a big way. We've just seen the finance minister announce a slew of measures promoting, different market models, market reform for agriculture. That's happening in a big way. So we see this happening in a big way. Local entrepreneurs we envision local entrepreneurs with more and more services. Sanitation entrepreneurs, agri entrepreneurs providing crop advisory services, health entrepreneurs, providing mobile diagnostics as a service coming up. Welfare schemes are so many. Now you need an entrepreneur to actually package these schemes and take it to the people and earn a livelihood out of that. So we see this happening. The third thing we see happening, and I believe this is going to really get a big boost, is telemedicine. Telemedicine, imagine we have villagers coming all the way to a hospital near Chennai in Vellore called Christian Medical College Hospital. Now they travel all the way to specialist hospitals far away. They get treated and they go back. And now in post-COVID times, it's not easy for them to come back for post-medical checkups, post-follow-on checkups. So telemedicine solves this problem very nicely. And lastly, Yogesh, I would think that this whole thing about online, training, and all of us over the last 1 month, perhaps there's a lot of webinar fatigue already, but more and more webinars are happening, and more training is actually happening through technology like Zoom and stuff like that. So we are looking at using online capability building. In fact, in Mission Samriddhi now we're trying to design a end-to-end content distribution platform for our Gram Panchayats. So this whole online remote conferencing and training is going to be, we are betting on it, and that's going to be picking up in a big way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram, for sharing all this information about Kerala. That was, in fact, an eye-opener for me at least, because the way you described how Kerala has gone ahead with the self-government or self-governance experiment and processes, and they have really sort of delegated a lot of authority and power down to these Gram Panchayats. That's really very encouraging. Now, turning to Mr. Farid Khan from IEEE. So IEEE SmartVillage initiative works across many rural communities across the globe. They are working in almost across all the continents, and they have a very unique approach to support communities by providing a very comprehensive solution combining renewable energy, community-based education, and entrepreneurial opportunities. Mr. Farid Khan, head of IEEE SmartVillage USA Asia operations, is leading India-wide initiative to reach 25 million beneficiaries with seed funding for grassroots entrepreneurship initiatives. So, Mr. Farid, could you please share a little briefly about the work that you're doing, and also what are you listening through the ears of all the grassroots entrepreneurs that you have built up and you are connected with? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind introduction, and it's a great privilege and honor to be here on this platform to discuss our modest work that we've been doing for the past 10 years now. I should begin by saying that our tagline, the IEEE tagline, Advancing Technology for Humanity, has more relevance now than it ever had before, I believe. Secondly, I would say that engineers are, I'm often asked, what am I doing in humanitarian? And well, I often ask that question myself, what am I doing? You know, it's a constant revision of what I should be doing and whether I'm doing things that have an impact, which is positive and purposeful. But other than that, I say that, you know, engineers are the architects and the keepers of not just human progress, but humanitarian progress as well. So for that reason, I would say that we have a huge mandate today in this post-COVID scenario. And I'm really thankful to you for giving me this opportunity to be on this platform. Now, we work across, yes, as you said, quite a few continents. We work in Africa extensively, we work in India, in other parts of Asia, Vietnam, for example, and we even work in the US with some Native American reservations. So yes, and South America as well. So quite a sweep, and COVID has been a great leveler. We are getting a lot of information back, and we're looking at that information and trying to fashion more technology solutions. But one thing I would say that, you know, the one big difference that I'm sure people who have been associated for far longer and in more active roles than I have been in IEEE and outside that, if we look at the 20th century, the technology was the imperative that came on after the World War, 2 world wars. And it built the cities and it built industry, and technology came in. I think what we are looking at in this post-COVID scenario today, that we were almost on a runaway train of economic progress, which is great, which reduced a lot of poverty across the globe. It generated wealth. It created a lot of health issues and so on, both good and bad. So we have more raised living standard, but there are other issues. So what we are hearing from the ground is your question. What we are hearing, of course, I think we've extensively heard about the issues with returning workers, which to begin with, they went away because the agriculture at the moment, specifically for India, does not really have the bandwidth to support the numbers that we have in rural India. So they had to migrate. IEEE SmartVillage has been going on for the last 10 years. And one of the things that we heavily promote is self-empowerment. And the 3 aspects of self-empowerment is clean energy as a basic enabler for everything to do with progress, education, which makes the individual, and not just the individual, the community as such, more powerful. And I think we heard that the Kerala model, or wherever we see that there has been a better response, we will see that their people are more informed, educated, and inclusively working together as a community. And the third that I would emphasize here, which will find a lot more relevance, is creating livelihood options within the communities that we work with, which is predominantly rural communities. So we work in rural India, we work in rural Africa, we work across the world with rural communities. And that is where we see that if we can create somehow the livelihood options to keep people there, if we can expand the education as we are doing now with online education platforms, that would be a huge benefit to not just the people living in rural areas, but for urban India and all urban communities anywhere in the world. So I would say that technology today that we bring in should be with a social contract. It should have a stakeholder-led approach, and a profit approach as well. I'm not against profit. I used to work in the corporate world for many, many years, and I'm still a part of it. So I'm not out of it. I'm not against it, but I think there needs to be a rebalancing. And this is one of the best times to do that, for us to think about what are the enormous challenges that rural and semi-urban, urban communities face. That is the first thing. So what IEEE can bring to it, and I will quickly go over it in 3 points, I would say. That first is the tech metrics. And technology metrics, whether they are captured by apps, whether they're captured by other data, and the analytics that will come on the back of it, is the prologue and the epilogue of this great story. So we capture those to understand what the problems are, and then we capture those as an impact measurement of how successful we were or not, and what were the challenges that we addressed but didn't really get the results that we wanted. So capturing the data and the tech metrics is one of the things that we're working at in IEEE to get that in a more user-friendly format. How does it really chime with the communities that we work with? Where the acceptability is maximum, and how do we go towards that? Ram spoke about the Kerala model. I think that's what they very successfully managed to do, is to integrate the communities and take the message to them with confidence that they are on their side. And that is one thing that once that gets across, all the humanitarian efforts, technology, non-technology, they all get a big acceptance. Otherwise, we can come up with a lot of gimmicks, wearables. IEEE is working on all of those as well. But unless we get the acceptability, there are wearables, for example, IEEE has come out which work on social distancing and will give you not just social distancing values, but also about their health and so on, which will be uploaded. So tech as an enabler of not just health and measures to monitor. And I'm not going into the surveillance and citizen rights at the moment. I don't think we have the time to do that. But this is the crisis situation, so let's address what the crisis demands and where we can go with that. So tech as an enabler of the enormous challenges that rural India and rural communities face. To understand those challenges first.
So thank you, Farid.
Yeah.
So you bring in a lot of technological innovations to these communities, and you deliver them through those micro entrepreneurs that you develop.
Yes.
Could you please share a little bit more about your program to develop these micro entrepreneurs, because that could have some answers for the problems like what Dr. Vibha highlighted to us. So do you think that could help answer some of those questions?
Okay, so that's one of my favorite topics. Thank you for bringing it up, Yogesh. And again, I would say that there's an opportunity here with the returning skilled and semi-skilled people who are coming from the urban areas back to rural India. What we try to do is to find people who have great connects within the communities. I often say that IEEE is not a funding organization, but we have a model that has worked across the world. So we put our money where our mouth is, and we go out there, find people, create entrepreneurship models. It's not charity. So we ask them to charge money for the services that they offer. It may not come back to us. It may go back into the program and bring in sustainability and take that program and replicate it to other communities. So what we find is that we go there and we have a bottom-up approach. And this is another unique thing that IEEE SmartVillage has been very proudly doing for over 10 years. The bottom-up approach that we have is to go to the communities and talk to them and understand what they can do and where not just their interests, but their strengths and skills lie. And then create and craft solutions as engineers that we are. And then work with them to roll them out, mentor them over a period of time. So we don't go there, throw technology at them and come back. And like often we engineers think that we throw enough technology at something, it'll somehow begin to work. That has been my humbling experience working in humanitarian, that unless you have buy-in, unless you have acceptability from the communities that you're working with, no technology would work. So creating livelihood solutions with technology, with the communities and the consent is key to what we do. Again, the same applies for education as well. So we bring education, we bring clean energy as a basic enabler, not just for livelihood or for education, but for health as well. We don't do health directly, and which is why I think Wheels is a great partnership that we have. But we provide the means to have all of those infrastructure in place so that rural communities can thrive. Thank you, if that answers your question.
Thank you. So there's another question I'm curious about is organizations like yours, IEEE, which are more like global humanitarian action groups, they were working in a certain way before COVID. So what has changed in your approach post-COVID scenario? So what's the shift in your approach that you can share about with us?
Okay, so I mean, the most obvious shift that I think every organization that has been working in any space, but especially in this space, would agree to is the fact that there is a sudden humanitarian crisis, and we need to rise to that challenge to see what can we do now today to provide them with just basic amenities at times. But on the back of it, what IEEE is also doing that we're looking at technologies that can address, like telemedicine, like wearables, as I said, social distancing, like using robotics, something called TurtleBot. They're autonomous UV, but they're disinfect. So we are doing a lot of work on that as well. And the other thing that we're trying to do is create that bridge. I think we've heard previous speakers talk about, Ram talked about it, Vibha did as well, that there are a lot of initiatives, but getting it down to not just the last mile, but to the final beneficiary. How do we do that? So we're bringing in lots of communication, technology, AI, ML, and solutions to do with that, to try them out and to see if we can really break that barrier, because often there is a lot of resource available, but it doesn't trickle down to the people who need it most. And that is the bottom of the pyramid. That goes back to my SmartVillage approach of working with the communities at the bottom. So that, I think, is where we are. There's a lot of things that we're doing. One final thing that I would say that as part of IEEE, and I sit on one of their committees as well, what we decided that we will do rapid interventions for something like $5,000, which will have a 72-hour turnaround. Someone comes to us, applies for a grant, and that will be addressed in 72 hours. So those are the initial but those impacts are kind of not long-term, but short-term. But if they're needed, we're there for that.
So thank you, Farid, for sharing this. I suppose there are many viewers amongst in our audience today would be developing a lot of technological solutions, and if they want to come and share it with you, how can they come and connect with you and share their solutions?
Number of ways. IEEE members, I would say, go through your IEEE section, because when you say technology solutions, a lot of them would be part of us. So go through your sections, or they can also directly connect with me. I don't have a problem with that. You can share my email. They can drop me emails, and we can work on that. But be very, very careful where you're going, because what we don't want to do is replicate the things that are already out there. Let's not create a crowd. Let's remain very focused on the delivery, not on the technology. I'll go back to the same thing again. Thank you.
Thank you, Farid. We'll be sharing your email address somewhere towards the end. I would like to do a poll with our viewers now. So Geetanjali, our co-host, our host, can you please share the poll on what kind of technologies should be developed, which areas are the ones where we should be developing technologies? So if you could share this poll, and maybe after a while we'll come back and see what the results are. In the meanwhile, we have been getting a lot of questions from our viewers, and our chair, Mr. Suresh Shinoy, is observing those questions. So Suresh, would you like to come in at this point of time and see and share, ask some of the questions that our viewers are asking us, our panelists?
Thank you, Yogesh. This has been a fabulous discussion, especially coming from people who are working in the trenches. There are a lot of questions, believe it or not, and I have tried my best to sort of bring them all together so each panelist can offer their observations and answers to these questions. So we'll start with, what do you see are some of the positive outcomes of the COVID crisis that are going to have a long-term impact on our cultural change, if you will? And reverse migration, for example, has resulted in some decongestion in the cities. Are some of these people expected to go back to the cities, to their old habitats, if you will? Or will the uniform wage policy have some kind of an impact on that? How can government incentivize, in this all the programs that they are announcing now, to boost skills development, create entrepreneurship, make villagers creators of wealth rather than recipients of aid? Can this be done in a democratic way so that villagers have a choice as to how some of this, the current environment can be used to define their own development needs? Another question to Farid specifically is, how do you share best practices from your SDWRC model in Tilonia, Rajasthan, where skills development was used to for women? How can they be transferred to other regions and other villages? So this is a kind of an all-encompassing question. I know there is a lot in there, so I thought bring it together and start with Vibha perhaps, because you're running a big rural area like Wardha. So can you please start, and if there is anything you need clarification, I'll be happy to repeat the question. You're on mute.
I'll answer just one of the questions. Is that the positive that happened because of COVID is that the nature could rest and it could unfold and show the world that there's so much the nature can give if you are really sensitive to it. So I think all over the world, and especially in India, that we could realize that we are doing so many follies, making it dirty and making is like suffocating it. So that's one thing which was very obvious, and the whole process of lockdown internally, that you go inside yourself and also outside the lockdown, has really did a lot of introspection within ourselves to bring a cleaner world, a more peaceful world, a world that's slow. And I wish it continues, that we learn this lesson and do something about it. One beautiful thing that I really wanted to share about Kerala was that they named the people who came to Kerala, we call them as migrant labor coming home, they call it Atithi Shramik. And they opened 28,000 kitchens for them, where they used to make 4 varieties of food for north, south, east, and west. And I think that's such a sensitive thing. And if any technology, instead of bringing tension, the consumerism bringing conquest, I think this is where the whole Corona affair or episode should make us learn that something as humanity, that we have much more to give than to take. Thank you.
Suresh, maybe I can take a stab at another part of the question, if I may.
Please do. Please do.
Sure. Vibha spoke extensively about agriculture, and the question was about culture. So I think, agriculture should become our culture, right? So agriculture, in fact, earlier today, there were a slew of reforms, and one may ask, like, why didn't these reforms even come much earlier? I mean, we had the agrarian crisis for a while now. The problem of the small farmers, the lack of access to credit, lack of infrastructure. But it's very heartening to really see what has happened today. I'll very briefly kind of summarize what's happening because of the new reforms in agriculture. There's a 20 billion package to strengthen Indian agriculture. They're looking at complete overhaul of logistics, including cold chains, warehouses, a lot of capacity building, and a lot of market reforms. Now, coming specifically to market reforms, there have been 3 legal frameworks that are going to be modified. One is the Essential Commodity Services Act is going to be modified, and it's going to become a law to allow extra storage and stocks to encourage better procurement and higher prices for the farmers. They can stock and they can sell to whomever they want to. This whole thing about the Agri-Produce Marketing Committee, the APMC Act, is now going to be modified to enable farmers to give them better market opportunities. So they can market to whomsoever they want to. So farm to fork models, which I was talking about earlier, will be encouraged more. Aggregators, and this will also attract a lot of private investment and private equity into which is much needed into the agriculture sector. Contract farming is going to be strengthened legally to ensure price discovery that can happen at the time of sowing itself. So all in all, I think COVID has really made us think hard. There are a lot of think tanks that have been working over the last few weeks, and I'm glad that the government is seriously overhauling and strengthening Indian agriculture. And I think the government is really listening to smart ideas right now and bringing these kind of changes, fundamental changes that hopefully should strengthen Indian agriculture. That's something which I wanted to bring across. Thank you, Suresh.
Thank you. Farid, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's a wide and deep and composite question that you came up with, Suresh. So, but we expect nothing less from you. Okay, so one of the things that I would say, improve access and delivery, because a lot of rural India is still involved in agriculture, which everyone's talked about it, is not very well practiced. A big issue that we come across is the market, the farm to fork, as Ram spoke about. The government can set out the acts and the laws, but the corporate sector has to step in somehow to make that happen, to make that cold chain and non-cold chain just happen so that people in the rural areas can get access to markets which are better functioning, but also have better revenues for them. The better revenues are there. It's just getting them that challenge, and that comes back to how technology and where technology can come in. So that's where I think I'm trying to take it to, that the tech bridge has to happen between rural and urban and so on, but keeping their cultures intact, because you can't really change the whole of rural India into urban India. That's not going to happen. That will be a disaster if we try to do that. So connecting humans has been done in the last 20, 25 years. The mobile revolution in India has been a huge success. Now we need to connect the humans in a human to human chain. And I think that's what the Kerala model has shown us, that we have to get there and get the technologies out and get people, the finance, the ancillaries. One of the things that I would suggest that the governments, because of this migration, the corporate sector and the government can try to find some ancillary units in those regions where people can remain there or build certain things which can then be fed right up the chain, just like a food chain. We could move those things up for urban, because most industry and factory is in urban India. So somewhere there, I think with these huge socks that are available in the government, we need to get very creative and try to see how best we can make this work for the long term. So again, I go back to my epilogue that the tech data, collecting the information and applying it to the industry and to agriculture, because we're going to see a lot of advance in agriculture unless we have very advanced farming practices, which are not possible in those small and land holdings that we have. 2/3 of the land holdings are under 5 acres. There is no way that you can bring in high tech into those farms. How do we do that? Contract farming, pros and cons there, but I'm not going to go into that. Telemedicine again is a big jump for telemedicine. India does have a huge problem of health in those areas. So yes, I think we need to start thinking from ground up and then make use of what's available out there in terms of not just the government, but the corporates. We all have to come together with this. That's the message I think we hear over and over again. Unless we do that, it's not going to really succeed. If we go back to the old practices, then it's an opportunity lost.
Suresh, can I just add in a thought? Suresh, I think we've been hearing a lot in this webinar about how we're envisioning these communities with technologies, with telemedicine, with emerging technologies for the agri sector, cold chains. Now, there's so much information. It can really be overwhelming. And people coming back, how do you reskill people? Now, I think, and I noticed somebody was asking, how do you actually make this happen in the rural communities, right? So I was just going back to our model that we were talking about earlier. It's very important to wire all this together so that everything comes together. If you're looking at in social development, if you're looking at health or in education, and if you're looking at economic development, if you're looking at, in economic development, looking at skills, we're looking at small businesses, we're looking at micro enterprises, and there are so many good proven solutions. But the point I want to make is we need to wire these proven models into a framework, simplify it, and take it to our village communities and show them these models and make them work. You make it work in one cluster of Gram Panchayats, and then that can grow on to the next cluster. And I want to just say this, that all this should be done through the local government, which is the Panchayats. Now, we cannot do it without them, because if you want this whole thing to be sustainable, we have no shortcuts, but do it in the sense that the Panchayats are empowered, because the constitution enables them to have thematic committees in agriculture, in health, but they're not functional. Now, if they're empowered, they own these solutions and they will take it and sustain. And that's what has happened in Kerala. I'm going back to that. And that's how these communities will get empowered, and that will grow viral and get replicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. I'm going to just
point on
quickly
that,
share.
Suresh. I would say just a very quick point I'll make that absolutely agree with what Ram said. And I think that has been one of the driving forces of us coming together, that we see that a bottom-up model is what I think you're talking about, Panchayat system, and working with communities and joining hands, people who are trying to do similar work in development and humanitarian, joining hands to go there with a composite solution and trying to work that out and then do the replication. And it's reciprocal learning as well. We learn from all over the world as SmartVillage. And I'm sure Ram would agree, what he learns in Jharkhand might have some application in UP or Maharashtra, and there would be some areas where you'll have to improvise. So that's how it goes. We need to come together with the government as well. There's no way that we can replace the government for any of this, whether it's Panchayat or whether it's, yes.
The learning that you bring from Africa, right? And what stops us from taking the learning from Africa or from Israel or from those other communities back in India, right? It's a global community.
It is
now.
a global thing, yeah.
It is.
And all development is global. Some issues are unique, but a lot of those issues are common. So that's been our learning.
Well, thank you.
I would like to say that whatever we do, it's basically to strengthen the rural economy. The draining of skills, resources, money from the village to the cities have to revert back, because unless any of our doing does drain them out of all their resources and their technical capabilities and traditions, is going to harm them more than before. So this coming back to the village, or the strengthening the village economy, going to the economy of permanence and making things in a different way is very important.
Thank you, Vibhaji. I want to quickly share the results of the poll. Very interesting that majority of the people, 25% or more, thought that the highest emphasis should be on education. And I'm assuming that would include not just primary and secondary education, but also adult education and skills development. The next priority, according to the attendees, should be healthcare. And that is to be expected since we are just coming out of a pandemic, or hopefully coming out of a pandemic. And that is followed with equal emphasis on agriculture and digital delivery platforms. And finally, water and sanitation. And only 4% of the people thought that energy was going to be an issue, which is very interesting, since Vibha mentioned that having reliable energy and alternate energy was an important consideration. Given this, this sentiment that is expressed by the attendees, what are the 2 or 3 things that NGOs and practitioners do immediately following COVID? Do you roll out education programs and entrepreneurship programs so migrant laborers can find employment? Do you focus on the digital delivery platforms? Do you focus on preparing for the next pandemic with healthcare solutions and public health? Where do you start? What are the 3 or 4 points in your view that have a priority, immediately following when life begins to come back to the new normal, if you will? Vibhaji, you may want to go first.
Yeah. The very first thing is that just the credit won't help. You have to have cash flow into the system. Whether you buy their market, their produce at good rate, get them fair price for their produce, give them straight away some kind of a monetary benefit. That's extremely important because they are hit low. They have absolutely nothing left with them, number 1. Number 2 is that now the Kharif season is going, the summer cultivation is going to start. They need lots of help now. If they don't get it, then they are going to lose this crop. Already they are in big loss of the crop of the previous year. So I have a feeling that agriculture is going to be the main thrust, and the money coming back to the rural economy is second. And third is to really give intensive help, physical, mental, psychological, to the people who have come back home. Because they may go back. Maybe 25% will remain because there's no ability for the village to absorb them. 75% may go back, but you have to really help them now. So this is the third priority, which is, I think, as a must. Then everything comes later.
Ram or Farid, Ram, you want to go next? What are the 3 or 4 things that you think both NGOs and Gram Panchayat should undertake, given the sentiment that was just expressed by our attendees?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Vibha. I think first things first, let's take care of the immediate requirements of, care and welfare of the people. So that's in the short term. But I think over the medium term, it's very important to really work with people's, in terms of transforming the mindsets and building capability. So we're talking about self-empowerment and completely self-reliant villages. So transforming mindsets, building capability of a rural communities with appropriate content, backed up by technology, of course, that will be our major focus. And in terms of, making sure that we are supporting right now the government schemes and packages and policies actually go to the last mile. How can we help the government? How can we be a catalyst to fast track that and actually make it happen? That is something that we are seeing, and that requires a lot of volunteering support to make sure that we work with Gram Panchayats, we empower them and make sure that these schemes are reaching the people. So this is very, very important. And the other things we already spoke about earlier in trying to get the ecosystem up and running for entrepreneurship and so on.
Thank you. Farid, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with all that's been said before, but I would say that we have to make a composite thrust here. The immediate is required, which is a crisis situation. That's a short term. And of course, that's needed. But we have a very complex situation at the moment because, yes, people will go back, but the production levels are going to be very low. So absorption of labor is not going to be as fulfilling as they would want it to be. Now I still hear at the moment in India that some factories are opening up, but then there's no one there. Once they start to go there, those factories would not be able to produce enough because the markets are at the moment, global markets are not as robust as they used to be. So this is a time where we kind of focus, working with the government, as I say, to offer solutions which are in the medium term going to provide not just employment, but it takes the pressure off the urban areas as well. One good thing that's also come out of it, that a lot of people in urban situations are now focusing on what should happen to rural India. I think that's a great thing to have when people are starting to look at that and trying to put their efforts, their resources, their energies in bringing about those solutions. Those solutions would come from the ground. We need to have an understanding of the issues and problems because there are a lot of new issues and problems that are there. So old learnings will have to go and new learnings will have to come. And then establishing better education, better ancillaries or a new industry in rural regions or semi-urban, rural regions is going to be key.
If I can share one point, Suresh. May I quickly share a point, Suresh?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
It was quite interesting to watch reverse migration happening. So there were a lot of workers, labor from Bihar, who were in Telangana, and they went during Holi back in the month of March back to Bihar. And now the labor from Bihar are coming back. They want to come back to Telangana because suddenly you see the Telangana government offering 1,200 rupees a day for these workers who are working in the rice mills. Because they're specialist labor, they know how to dehusk and, the paddy and load them. So what's also going to happen is that we will find, I think, living conditions, wages actually improve for the better. Hordes of people who come from different parts and work in the metros as construction labor. I'm really hoping that the work conditions workplace conditions, workplace safety norms, the living conditions, and even the wages should significantly improve. I think that's going to be an outcome where you need the labor to come back. That could be a good outcome, which I'm kind of envisioning. Thank you.
Yogesh, back to you.
Thank you, Suresh. That this was a very lively, very enlightening discussion, and we have almost crossed 75 minutes of our webinar. Before we come to the last words, I would like to ask each one of you is if you could share one key takeaway, or if you want to share more than one key takeaway, you're free. What are the key takeaways you would like to share coming out of this conversation today? So starting with Mr. Farid Khan and Ram and then Vibha.
Okay, so if I may go with two, but I'll keep it very brief. One, I think it's incumbent upon us, but also to really look at what the government is trying to do, is to go to the corporates and try to see if there is a possibility of distributed manufacture in terms of scaling the manufacture down from the urban areas and bringing in ancillary units so it becomes one whole continuum. And so that would be one of the things. Education, of course, online education has been something that we've been promoting. It's become central now these days with webinars, especially with people like all of us. So that would be a key takeaway, that I think bringing more education and skilling into the regions that are lacking perhaps at the moment, which would take the pressure off the urban as well. So it's not something we're doing for the rural, we're doing it for ourselves. I mean, there are dolphins in South Bombay, I hear now, that people have seen and so on. So there are all sorts of, it's a win-win situation for all of us. But we need to react in a different manner. We need to be creative with our reactions. Thank you.
So Ram, would you like to share?
Sure. I think I just only want to share one. If there's only one message I would want to leave everyone, then it's simply this, that I've spoken about this earlier. Working with people, transforming their mindsets, building the capability of our rural communities. When I say rural communities, I'm talking about our Gram Panchayats and the entire community. So give them the right models for development, proven models for social and economic development. And that's how they get self-empowered and self-reliant and prosperous. We want to see our rural communities as prosperous, shining communities. We do it once and do it multiple places and then replicate that. This is what I wish to see. I wish to leave everybody with. Thank you.
Thank you. Vibhaji?
Yeah, I would say that the rural India has its own mind intelligence. They have creativity and they have indigenous science and technology. That has to be revived. We cannot have another city happening in a village. They can't become ancillaries of big industries to bring their, spread their dirt around. Because it's very necessary that we keep intact the naturalness of the place, of the people, and let them unfold themselves. So it's very important that we don't sort of rush into the whole concept of decentralization and putting industries and bringing know-how to them. It's very important that let them unfold, because there's a lot lost in all these 50 years, 100 years. They have to regain. We have lost our indigenous seeds. We have lost our indigenous forest. We have big issues with wild animals getting into our field. So there are n number of issues that has to be addressed before we really make another carbon copy of the cities. So please let the village be village. Thank you.
Thank you. So let the villages be villages. So you see, a recording of this webinar would be available on our website and on YouTube. The recording of our first webinar is also available on our website, and there was many questions which were asked in the first webinar which could not be answered due to paucity of time, and we have recorded those questions and answers, and that question and answer recording is also available. Similarly, whatever questions that have remained unanswered during this session, we will be recording them and posting them on our website. With this, I hand it over to our chair for closing the session today.
Thank you very much, Yogesh ji. Thank you, Vibha, Ram, and Farid, for your excellent and very insightful remarks. It's for a lot of us who are sitting at home. It's a lot of these things are eye openers, and also encouraging to know that even the darkest clouds have silver linings. So COVID has offered both hope as well as opportunity to sort of figure out how we can convert our villages from recipients of aid to generators of wealth, if you will, by more entrepreneurship, better skills training, and etc. The recent remarks by Prime Minister Modi, where he outlined his 5-pillar program, also has technology as one of them, technology adoption and infrastructure, which is very is music to our ears, because that is something that Wheels has advocated from the get-go, that technology is very key to scale development and to be adopted in and embraced in multiple different ways. So this has been a very timely conversation. Our next event, where we will have the Director General of the CII, the Consortium of Indian Industries, Mr. Dr. Chandrajit Banerjee, along with our own chairman of Wheels Charitable Foundation, Ashank Desai, who is the founder of NASSCOM, where we will explore how the new financial incentives and the financial programs are going to help industry to come back. And Ashank will also be able to talk in terms of how COVID might have affected one of the major engines of India's development, which is outsourcing, software development, etc., particularly in the urban areas, and how some of that might be translated into rural development initiatives. So look forward to that, which is going to be on May 29th. And following that, we also have some significant speakers on rural remedies, which is using Ayurveda and other centuries-old practices in India, particularly in the rural areas where still about 800 million people depend on rural remedies. So that should be a very interesting conversation as well. Look forward to that. So, clearly COVID is helping us launch and catapult this world and all of humanity to adopt digital and other technology platforms, and how even Industry 5.0 technologies, which Vibha alluded to earlier, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc., could be applied for rural development. So our technology-enabled philanthropy tagline is very valid. So I'm very happy that that was somewhat validated. At the end of this webinar, I would encourage you to stay on, because our illustrious staff and helpers and volunteers have put together a presentation encapsulating all the key takeaways and outcomes from today's event, which will also be published on our Facebook page. Again, we are a donor-supported organization, so your help and consideration would be most appreciated. And until we see you next time on May 29th, please take care, stay safe, and keep well. Thank you very much.
Same to
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
If you can,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
If you can run the presentation, please, on the, yeah, thank you very much.